within the wider community. For the already received, we need your support in providing the future generations the opportunity to make a difference within our community.
وزدنا علما وعملا يا ارحم الراحمين سبحانك لا علم لنا الا ما علمتنا انك انت العليم الحكيم. So last class we covered the remainder of the articulation points of the letters, and the letters that we covered are starting from Bad, which is from the edges of the tongue till the tip of the tongue and the lips and the nasal passage. So the Bad, harf Bad, its articulation point, as is on the questions, is from the edge of the tongue with the nearby upper molars. That's the one. The specific articulation point of the Lam is from the where? MashaAllah, we have a good amount of people online. Is it from the middle of the tongue, the Lam? No, the tip of the tongue? Shabab? The tip of the tongue? From the edge of the tongue? The middle of the tongue? Huh? The edge of the tongue. Allah. Right. Is from the nearest part of both edges of the tongue to the utmost tip. So, this part of the tongue. That part of the tongue. Right. Tip of the tongue, from the edges of the tongue, from the nearest part of the both edges. Mesh. Right. What is the specific articulation point of the letter Noon? So, user 3, please specify what your name is. So, user 3 is asking, what is the difference between the edge and the tip? Anybody want to answer that? What is the difference between the edges and the tip? Aya Shuaib. So if you look at the slide on page, I'm not sure what page this is. So this here is the edges of the tongue. Right? Think of a mountain. You're on the top of the mountain, and the edges of the mountain are around here. These are the edges of the mountain. So that's the edge. Okay? The Bad is from the edge. Left or right or both. That's what the Bad is. The Lam is from the end of the edges. So starting here to the utmost tip, this is the utmost tip. That's what the Lam is. Sorry. Let's see for me. All right. The specific articulation point of the letter Noon. The letter Noon. It's from the tip of the tongue with the gums, just below Lam. The tip of the tongue with the gums just below the harf al-lam. So last class, we said that the tip of the tongue, because the lam also, because the edges, the end of the edges until the utmost tip. So with the lam, the noon, the ra, that's 3. The ta, the ta, the ta, that's 6. The sin, the zai, the sad, that's 9. The dhal, tha, and the ra, that's 12 letters. 12 letters are all involved in the tip of the tongue. And how many letters are there total? How many sounded letters are there total? Huh? Arabic, how many letters does Arabic have? 20? 28, right? 28 sounded letters. So more than a third of the letters are on the tip of the tongue. Huh? More than a third of the letters are on the tip of the tongue. SubhanAllah. هذا خلق الله. طيب. The specific articulation point of the ra is from the tip of the tongue with what lies opposite of the gums close to the letter noon. So the ra is close to the letter noon, just about the same articulation point. The difference is the noon, you close the passage and the sound comes out through the nose. The noon, you close and the sound comes out through the nose. With the ra, it's almost closed, but you leave a small gap at the tip of the tongue and the sound comes out through that gap. Ar, 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 ar. ماشي؟ طيب. I think it's more productive if I have everybody come sit at this table, please. I think that would be more productive. That way I can show you what I'm talking about, inshallah ta'ala. So on this side of this table, so you can see. So even get chairs from behind there. تفضلوا. أيوه. I can have somebody seated here as well. All right. So the ta, ta, and dal are from the tip of the tongue with the roots of the top 2 incisors. The top 2 incisors are the 2 front teeth. Or they're called the central incisors. Thad, sin, and zai from the tip of the tongue or the end of the tongue's tip with the bottom of the inner surface of the lower incisor. So these are lower incisors here on the inside of their surface. You place the tongue here. Else, as, al, as, else, here. The specific articulation of dhal, tha, and dha is the tip of the tongue with the tips of the upper 2 incisors. So these are the upper 2 incisors, and the tongue comes here. The tip of the tongue comes here. L, L, S, L, 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 S. All right. So the qaf, these are, yeah, same. It's repeated. So the reason I repeat these is because the more you go over them, the easier they become. Repetition, or yeah, they say repetition teaches the donkey, right? التكرار يعلم الحمار. So if it teaches the donkey, alhamdulillah, it teaches human beings better. The letter dad, right, using the following components components. The letter Dad uses the right edge of the tongue, the left edge of the tongue, both right and left edges of the tongue. So you can do the Dad either on the right side or on the left side or with both sides. What is the difference between the heavy and light lam? So this is also shown in the diagram. The heavy lam, you raise the farthest part of your tongue up. All right, so your tongue kind of looks like this because the tip of the tongue or the front edges of the tongue are touching the roof of the mouth. So your tongue kind of looks like this. Allahu, Allahu, Allahu. Right? With the light lam, you say Lillahi, Lillahi, Lillahi. With the heavy one, Allah, Allahu, like that. So that's the difference. With the heavy lam, the back part of the tongue goes up. With the light lam, the back part of the tongue goes down. And there's, of course, there's narrowing in the throat as well with the heavy lam. But we'll skip those true and false ones. The specific articulation point of the letters, the letter fa, the upper two incisors, the tips with the inside of the bottom lip. F, F. The waw by circling the lips, wa, wa, wa. Now this is speaking about the voweled waw, al-waw mutaharrika. Okay. What's the difference between the voweled waw and the mad waw? Su'aib. Right. Sheikh Bilal, do you remember? The mad waw and the voweled waw. What's the difference?
Voweled waw is articulation point of the lip.
Right. The voweled waw's articulation point is the lips. Ahsant. Barakallah fi. Mad waw. So why are we differentiating, Mr. Ibrahim? This is something that will be repeated, inshallah ta'ala. So don't feel bad if you don't remember it, because it will be repeated for lessons to come, inshallah ta'ala. So the difference, my friend, you are Sheikh. The difference is, Mahir, do you remember the difference?
Sorry, I was answering our brother on the group. What was the question?
You were, mashallah, mashallah. The question, my friend, is why is there a difference between the voweled waw, al-waw al-mutaharrika, and the mad waw, the elongation waw?
The
Why do they have
elongation waw.
different articulation points?
So the mad waw, it comes from the
Not the throat,
jawf,
from the
throat.
jawf. You said that jawf is correct.
Jawf, sorry.
Because the jawf, al-jawf is the throat and the mouth.
The mouth, yeah,
Together.
all together.
Right.
Okay, and the waw al-mutaharrika, it's from the wow, it's you have to curve your lips.
Right, by
forward,
circling the lips.
circling the lips and applying pressure.
Aywa. Aywa.
Yeah, so you gotta apply pressure for it to.
Aywa. So that's where the difference is. That's the reason why there's a difference, because there's more pressure on the lips with the waw al-mutaharrika. There's more pressure on the lips with waw al-mutaharrika. With the mad waw, you are circling your lips as well. Qulu wa huwa in both cases, you're circling your lips. The difference is with the voweled waw, there's more pressure on the lips than there is with the med waw. The med waw, the pressure is very little. Much. The differentiation between the waw med and the waw that is not a med, that's what we just talked about. The non-med waw needs more pressure applied, so this should be correct. We'll fix that, inshallah. طيب. The specific articulation point of the letter ba by closing the two lips together. The letter meme by closing was accompanied by gunna from the nasal cavity for the meme. And we are done. طيب. All right. Today, inshallah, we will talk about characteristics of the letters. We can reach it, inshallah. Getting there, almost. All right. What is meant by the characteristics of the Arabic letters? In the science of Tajweed, what we mean by characteristics of the Arabic letters is those characteristics which distorting them affects the sound of the letter. All right, so before we get into that, think of a person, right? A person could either be tall or short. Person could either be brown, light colored, or black, right? A person could be thin or heavy, okay? A person could have the ability to see or not. All of these are characteristics, okay? So when we talk about characteristics of letters, it's a similar concept, okay? So an example is whisper, right? A letter can have the characteristic of whisper. Whisper is a characteristic that indicates that you hear breath and not voice. So the letter S is a letter of hams, or breath, or whisper. The letter Z has the characteristic of sound, or voice, or being apparent, al-jahr. You guys have any questions online? Fine. If you have any questions, don't be shy to ask, please. So when a person is tall, right, by definition, that person cannot be short. Right? If a person is heavy, by definition, that person cannot be thin, right? Yeah. So these are opposite characteristics, right? Sometimes characteristics are not opposites. An example is a person can be cheerful and charismatic, correct? They can go together, right? Cheerful and charismatic. A person can also be cheerful and an introvert, yes? Not keeping to themselves, but they're still cheerful. right? These are not opposite characteristics. They can go together, right? Likewise, with the letters, a letter can be whispered, and it can also be soft, like the letters. It's whisper and it's soft. Soft meaning the air flows. This letter can also be a light letter where there's no heaviness in it, because these are not opposite characteristics. These are compatible characteristics. Okay. You guys have any questions online?
We're good.
Yeah, so I'm just describing the concept of characteristics, or sifat al-huruf, as a concept. All right. So now the Sheikh is saying that they are characteristics which distorting them affects the sound of a letter. So for example, if I say Bismillah, Bismillah, right? Is that correct or incorrect? Huh? What's wrong with it? Why you got a problem? Huh? So what's the problem? I added what? So I replaced the letter with another. So tell me exactly what happened. What is the difference between Bismillah and Bismillah? What's the difference? The determining factor is a characteristic. That's the determining factor.
The letter or the word?
What did you hear? Z. That's the difference. What exactly is the difference? Vibration of what? The vocal cords vibrate. There's no vibration of vocal cords. So when the vocal cords vibrate with a letter, that letter is an apparent letter, jahar letter. When the vocal cords don't vibrate, that is a whisper letter. So the difference between Bismillah and Bismillah is whisper or apparent. Okay? And this is something we'll talk about as well when we get to the topic of the relationship between letters. So the sin and za would be mutajanisan. I forgot how I translated it before.
Sin and ja would be what?
Mutajanisan. The relationship between the two is that they have the same articulation point but different characteristics.
Oh, cognates.
Cognates.
Yeah.
I like that. I translated it as something different. I don't remember what it was, but cognates, huh?
That's like the linguistics.
أيوة. أحسنت. طيب جزاك الله خيرا. Cognates. تمام. So when you distort the characteristic, it affects the sound of the letter, like I just demonstrated. Bis and biz. Whisper and apparent. That's what I just demonstrated. Lowering, istifal, and elevation. An example is asa and asa, mahdhura, mahdhura. So asa is lowering. There's no echo in the mouth. Sa, sa. Right? The tongue is lowered and the sound is going down. Sa, so. The tongue in the back is raised and there's echo. Right? Asa, asa. The difference between the two is lowering and elevation. Lowering and elevation.
The tongue?
The back of the tongue goes up and the sound is raised, goes to the top, goes to the dome, and it echoes off of the dome of the mouth.
So the sound that we're talking about, not the tongue in particular?
We're talking about the Yeah, the direction of the sound. But in order to make that direction of the sound, the tongue has to do something in the back.
I'm sorry. What do we call them in English?
Ooh, you're talking about what? Elevation?
Yeah, lowering and استعلاء.
So here, lowering for istifal and elevation for isti'la.
Thank you.
Allah yabarak fikum. Contrary to the titles of the letters, which the letter is related to a certain area of the mouth, such as the shajariya letters. What are the shajariya letters? The tree letters. Al-jim wa shin wal ya, because they're in the area of shajar al-lisan. And the nata'iyya letters, the ta, ta, and ta, because they're at the place of the nata' al-lisan. All right? So that's the meaning of the characteristics. When I ask you what are the characteristics, these are the characteristics that distorting them changes the sound of the letter. Mashi?
4 characteristics in total, or
These are 4 of them. Total, it's more.
الشجرية والنطعية.
These are titles of letters. Yeah. Mash. All right. So the characteristics of the letters are of 2 types. Some that are opposites, and we talked about that, tall and short. They're opposites. Others are compatible with others. They're not opposites. They don't have opposites. Right? And like we mentioned, someone who is cheerful and tall. Right? You can be tall and cheerful. It's not a problem. You can be short and cheerful. That's not a problem. Right? They're compatible. So some characters have to have an opposite characteristics. Some characteristics must have an opposite. Some of them have 2 opposites, and we'll talk about that inshallah in a little bit. Other characteristics do not have an opposite. There is no opposite to it. Now, to understand what we mean by opposites, so if a letter is a whisper letter, and this is as an example, it cannot be an apparent letter. It cannot be a jahar letter. It just can't. If a letter is a jahar or an apparent letter, it cannot be a hams letter or a whisper letter. It just can't. So if you learn the letter jim, for example, is an apparent letter or a jahar letter, you also know that it is not a hams letter, a whisper letter. Yeah? If you understand that the jim is a lowering letter or istifal letter, by default, it is not an isti'la letter, a raising or elevated letter. Okay, clear? That's the meaning of characteristics with opposites. I'm having trouble with the word characteristics apparently today. As opposed to characteristics without opposites, most of you are familiar with the characteristic of qalqala, right? Just because a letter is a qalqala letter doesn't really mean anything else. It's just a qalqala letter. And that's it. Okay? A secret that you will realize later is that all of the qalqala letters are also strength letters, but not all the strength letters are qalqala letters.
قلقلة قل هو الله أحد.
أيوة عليك نور ما شاء الله.
في كم حرف للقلقلة؟ 5.
قطب جدي
قطب جدي.
ضربك على راسك. طيب يلا بسم الله. طيب let's start with the opposites inshallah. You guys ready? Ready? يلا. Allah. All right. So we're going to take these one at a time. So the ones with opposites are 8. or 9. They're 9, not 8. All right. So the first, apparent and whisper. Characteristic, or these two opposites, pertain to whether you hear voice, whether the vocal cords vibrate or not. If the vocal cords vibrate to pronounce the letter, what letter is it? Which is it, hams or whisper? Hams or jahar? The vocal cord vibrates. No, it's the opposite, habibi. Jahar. Jahar means apparent. You can hear it. There's sound. There's voice. Right? So if you hear the sound, if the vocal cords vibrate with the letter, you know it's an apparent letter. An example. The dal. Z. Ba. Vocal cords vibrate. If the vocal cords vibrate, you know it's an apparent letter. If the vocal cords do not vibrate, you know it's a whisper letter. Whisper or apparent? Allah. Alayk nur. Ya Sheikh. Whisper or apparent? Whisper. Ya Mahir.
نعم.
I just want to make sure you're still around, brother.
أنا
ما
موجود
شاء الله
الحمد
عليك،
لله.
ما شاء الله عليك. طيب يا حبيبي، الكاف whisper ولا apparent؟ جهر ولا همس؟
جاهر.
لا كذا ازعل منك.
كاف.
لا, don't say ka. I'm talking about just the letter. Without a فتحة. بس الكاف.
كا.
لا من غير صوت, من غير فتحة. Without a فتحة.
همس. اوكي إذا من
غير
غير
فتحة. ايوه همس. ايوه تمام. طيب. Yeah. So the first two opposites pertain to whether or not the vocal cords vibrate. If they vibrate, what kind of letter is it? Jahab. If they don't vibrate, it is hams. Jazakallah khairan. All right. The second consideration. The second consideration has 3, right? Strength, softness, and in between. And this relates to if the sound is blocked at the articulation point. Ab, ab, ab. The sound is blocked. Ab, ab. Or the sound is partially blocked. Ar, al, partially blocked. Al, ar, an. The sound is partially blocked. Right? It's not blocked fully, but partially blocked. And softness or rakhawa, where the sound is not blocked at all. There's a flow of air. All right? So think of it as a faucet. A faucet, if it's closed, that would be a strength letter. If you open it just a little bit, water comes out, but it comes out slowly. That's an in-between letter. If you open it all the way, right? Open the floodgates, that's rakhawa. So those are 2 different considerations. So if a letter is a strength letter, like jim, this means it is not a soft letter. And it also is not a in-between letter. Right? If a letter is an in-between letter, it also is not a Not a strength letter. It's also not a
Soft letter.
soft letter. Mumtaz. So lam is an in-between letter. Al is lam a soft letter? Is it a soft letter?
No.
It's an in-between letter. Is it a soft letter? It can't be. If it's an in-between letter, it can't be a soft letter. Is it a strength letter, my friend? ليه؟ Why not? على كيفك؟ Huh? Why not? Dun, dun, dun. Huh? Why isn't it a strength letter, Habibi? Because strength is its opposite. Acts, right? ضده.
Like, am I going to put two characteristics from those three?
شوف يا حبيبي. This is like you're saying someone is tall and short at the same time. Remember what we said about this second consideration. Either the sound is blocked at the articulation point, totally blocked, or there's a little bit of airflow. It's partially blocked. Or it's not blocked at all. It can't be all three or two of them at the same time. One, two, or three. It can't be three or two, two or one or three. No. Either or. واضح؟
قلنا اللام البينية.
اللام للبينية. So because it's بينية, it cannot be strength. It cannot be soft. Why? Because it's in between. Tamam.
So that it's not closed and it's not open. It's
Absolutely. Absolutely. MashaAllah. طيب. Any questions online? Let's see. Is not here today. All right. So back to the harf al-lam. Is it an apparent letter or a whisper letter? Lam? How do you know something is apparent and how do you know something is whisper?
It's apparent
Aywa, tamam. It's apparent.
because the vocal cords vibrate.
MashaAllah. Jazakillahu khairan. Ahsanti. It's apparent because the vocal cords vibrate. It is also an in-between letter. It's an in-between letter because the sound is partially blocked at the articulation point. Come on. Yeah? Any questions? طيب.
as not vibration. Whisper.
أحسنت. Vibration is here. Right there.
Another example of بينية. وهذه كمان apparent.
ايش رايك؟
صحيح.
هذه برضو قاعدة. كل الحروف البينية أيضا حروف جهرية. كلهم. All the in between letters are all jahr letters, apparent letters. Don't tell anybody I told you that.
That was my next question.
That was your next question. All of the strength letters are also apparent letters, except for two. And we'll get to that, inshallah. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Inshallah. But the next consideration, elevation and lowering. Basically, it means whether a letter is fat or thin. If a letter is fat, this means it is not thin. If a letter is thin, this means it is not fat. How do I know a letter is fat or thin? Say, oh, awesome. 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 Oh. That's fat. Oh, that's fat. Awesome. Of course, that's not an Arabic letter, an Arabic word, because alif وحاذرا تفخيم لفظ الألف, right? Because alif is never fattened in the Arabic language, but I use that as an example because we're all English-speaking people. So for something that is light or thin, we would say apple. Apple. Can you say apple? Apple. Apple. Now say awesome. What's the difference? Feel what happens inside of your mouth. Apple. Awesome. Right? What happens in your mouth? Aywa. The tongue. What about the tongue, Habibi?
Moves up and down.
Aywa. What happens? It goes back to where? To its origin. إلى أصله, مسقط رأسه. أيوة. The tongue rises in the back and the throat narrows. The tongue rises and the throat narrows. Right? So if a letter is thin, it cannot be fat. If it is fat, it cannot be thin. If a letter is an elevation letter, it cannot be a lowering letter. If it's a lowering letter, it cannot be an elevation letter. Like the difference between qaf and ka. Qaf, ka. Aqo, ak. Aqo, ak.
And then ka, whisper letter.
شو رأيك أنت? What do you think? Whisper. طيب. What do you think? هذا مش قاف, هذا خاء. شو مالك أنت؟ أقو. أقو.
جهرية.
جهة. أيوه. أيوه. It's making sense, right? Wow, subhanallah. طيب. So that's the third consideration.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
هلا حرف التاء it could be both همس and شدة.
أيوه. See, هذا دليل. This is proof that you have been thinking, sister. جزاك الله خيرا. You're paying attention. So letters kaf and ta are both strength letters and whisper letters. شديدة مهموسة. تمام؟ You got that, Sister Manal?
So a letter can have more than one characteristic. It can be شديد, همس. We can do more than one thing in one letter. It can't be the opposite, but it can have more characteristic in one letter.
ممتاز, ممتاز. This is a very good question. So every letter لازم. It has to have at least 4 of these opposites. Every letter has to have at least 4 of these opposites. So if a letter has hams, it cannot have jahab. And this hams letter, maybe it's softness. If it's soft, it cannot be strength, it cannot be in between. So it's hams and soft. It can also be istifal. If it's istifal, it cannot be elevation. So it's hams, so it's whisper, softness, and lowering. It can also be infitah. So it has 4 characteristics. And that letter, for example, is sin. As. So sin is hams, whisper, it's soft, it's lowering, and it's open. So every letter has to have at least 4. 1 of each of the opposites, or 1 of each of the categories. So this category has to do with vibration of the vocal cords. The second category has to do with flow of air at the articulation point, flow of sound at the articulation point. The third has to do with fattening or thinning. And the fourth and last one, it's called adhesion and openness. And that is a characteristic of the mouth. Because fattening a letter, it's either exaggerated or regularly fat, or not fat at all, thin. So the adhesion is talking about fattening a letter to the point that it's exaggerated. You fatten it to the point that it's exaggerated. So it's more fattening. وحرف الاستعلاء فخم واخصصا لطباقة أقوى نحو قال والعصا. Right? So حرف الاستعلاء, the letter of استعلاء, the letter of elevation or fattening, is supposed to be fat or heavy. However, al-itbaq, adhesion, is even heavier, even fatter. So that would be the difference between qala, qa, and al-asa, al-asa. فألقى عصاه ألقى عصا قا عصا قا عصا. So it's an exaggerated heaviness. So these are 4 categories for 9 opposites. The first consideration, or the first category, is whether or not the vocal cords vibrate. If they vibrate, it's an apparent letter. If they don't vibrate, it's a whisper letter. The second category or consideration is whether or not the sound or breath is blocked at the articulation point. If it's totally blocked, it's a strength letter, shidda. If it's partially blocked, it's an in-between letter. If it's not blocked at all, it flows, it is a softness or a khawa letter. The third consideration is fattening or thinning of a letter. If the letter is thin, then it is istifal. If it is fattened, it is an elevation. The fourth and last consideration is if the letter is fattened in a manner that is exaggerated. If it is, then it is an adhesion letter or itbaq. If it is not, then it is an open letter, al-infitah.
Al-infitah is the opposite
of itbaq.
Itbaq, which example would be, like you said,
Sadu, dadu, ta'u, dha. 4 letters. The 4 fat letters. The ones that have big bellies. You know what I'm talking about? They're laying on their stomach because they got done eating so much. Right? They filled their stomachs. Right?
Openness.
The Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? What's the hadith? Al-Maqdam. Al-Mahdi Karib. What's the hadith? ما ملأ ابن آدم وعاء شر من بطن. Right? The human being cannot fill any container worse than his stomach. Right? And unfortunately, Sad, Dad, and Ta, and Dha, that's what they did. They filled their bellies, and now they're all exaggerated and fat. So, ila qiyam as-sa'a, until the end of time, they're always going to be fat. For them. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Na'udhu billahi min al-bitna.
يعني مقدم اللسان مع مؤخر اللسان إلى الحروف يعني الصدى والقط وفقط يعني سوى حروف الإطلاق مؤخر اللسان يعني
يرتفع المقدم. هو in the Sad, Dad, Ta, Tha, it doesn't necessarily, the tongue doesn't necessarily have to rise from the front, but what happens is the taqa'u, the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Cupping of the tongue. So the tongue is cupped like this. So there'll be more echo. Because the more echo, the fatter the letter sounds. So qa and qa, or qa and sa, right? There's more of a cupping on the tongue. So this goes up, the back of the tongue goes up, and there's a cupping that happens here.
I have a question.
تفضل.
هلا, you talked about إطباق and انفتاح. Are they the same as تفخيم and ترقيق? Or
أيوة.
those are different things?
Ya salam. MashaAllah, sister, your questions are on the money today. MashaAllah. So, tafkhim and tarqiq are byproducts.
Byproduct of إطباق and
No,
انفتاح.
they're byproducts of, so tafkhim is a byproduct of isti'la and itbaq.
Oh, okay.
And tarqiq is a byproduct of istifal and infitah.
So
Yeah.
so what is إطباق and انفتاح now?
أيوة. So itbaq is a level higher in terms of tafkhim. It's more tafkhim.
More تفخيم. إطباق is
More
more تفخيم.
tafkhim than isti'la.
Oh, okay.
So in order to make that more tafkhim, you have to do what's the itbaq inside of the mouth. So it's like your mouth is folding on each other. That's why they call it adhesion, like something is being stuck. So the tongue, it happens taqa'ur, it turns into something like a bowl, kind of. And you're kind of closing in on the inside of your mouth. And the byproduct of that is extra tafkhim. So what you hear, for example, فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ عَصَاهُ عَصَاهُ. There's a difference. All right. Any questions on this? I don't think we've done any more than 2 pages today. Right? But we're going to fly through like 20 pages, inshallah. Five. Any questions? Mahir. Any questions?
نعم. Good, alhamdulillah.
Sister Yasmin, any questions?
I was just wondering if you have a resource that states every single letter and every category that every letter falls under for studying purposes, if you could put that together, if you don't mind.
This book has that.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're still, what happened? ما الذي حصل؟ لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get everyone to understand, okay, why are these opposites? What is being considered, right? What is the difference between the opposites? So that when we go forward, there's no confusion going forward. That's all we're doing now. But in terms of breaking everything down and the characteristics of each letter, and we'll get to that, inshallah. But and then the Sheikh mentions the characteristics that do not have opposites, and they are whistling, Sad, Zay, and Sin, qalqala, you guys most of you are familiar with it, qutb jadid, softness, al-lin, waw and ya, that have a sukoon, a non-vowel with a fatha before them, drifting, fi ra, fi lam wal ra, repetition, fi ra, spreading, fi sheen, lengthening, fi dad, and nasalization in noon and mim, and each one will talk about extensively, insha'Allah ta'ala. But these don't have any opposites. Any questions on these? So if you count the 9 plus the 8, 9 and 8 equals what?
17.
هكذا?
So,
17. Did you do the math right? Yeah? 9 and 8 is 17. Take your word for it. Promise. All right. Now, let's find out the letters for each category of opposites. The Arabic letters according to the flow and imprisonment of breath. We talked about that. Either the breath or sound flows at the articulation point, or no. Flow and imprisonment of breath. Okay. So basically what he's saying is that when the breath is imprisoned, it's imprisoned at the vocal cords. That's basically what he's saying. So جريان وانحباس النفس. So this is talking about the vibration of the vocal cords. Either the vocal cords vibrate or they don't. They don't vibrate with 10 letters. سكت فحثه شخص. He was quiet, so a person encouraged him. Right? So the soft G is not one of them. Encouraged. سكت فحثه شخص. سين كاف تا ثا ع ثا ها شين خا صاد. سكت فحثه شخص. Okay. As for the apparent letters, the rest of the letters. What are the hams letters, the whisper letters?
سكت فحث شخص.
فحثه.
فحثه شخص.
سكت فحثه شخص. What are they? ما شاء الله عليك. Mahir. What are the whispering letters?
سكت فحثه شخص.
عليك نور. طيب, Sister Layan, what are the apparent letters? I'm calling on someone that is here or not?
Question again?
What are the apparent letters, the majhula letters?
The apparent letters are
So all the letters minus سكت فحثه شخص.
so ضاد.
Right. So the answer is all of the letters minus سكت فحثه. أخت Layan, you got it? You got that?
Yes.
So the apparent letters are كل الحروف, all of the letters. Minus سكت فحثه شخص. All right?
Okay.
That's when it comes to vibrating the vocal cords or not. So the Sheikh is saying that whisper is a suppression in hearing as a result of the separation of the two vocal cords without their vibration and an abundant flow of breath. The disconnect of the vocal cords. A real picture of the vocal cords when doing hums. Pretty neat. At least I think so. Jahar. It is clarity in hearing as a result of joining and vibration of the two vocal cords and imprisonment of breath. So if we think about how long can you hold as opposed to how long you can hold much longer, right? Because with there's an imprisonment of breath. You have more control. But with you run out of breath right away. So هذا هو. And this is a real picture of the vocal cords when doing jahab. I'm sorry, what? That's what it says, brother. It says a real picture. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the word for it. Maybe they took a picture with a tube. You gonna try to take a picture like this? Yeah. Yalla. So this is showing a comparison between when you apply an apparent letter and when you don't apply. Right? Closed and open. This is for the vocal cords. Either they're closed or they're open. You got 5 more minutes. Fine. Any questions on jahar and hams, apparent and whisper? I think we're crossing that bridge, right? سكت فحثه شخص. All right. Strength, softness, and in between. The Arabic letters according to the flow of the sound in the articulation point. Right? So the flow of sound in the articulation point or at the articulation point. Either it flows smoothly or it flows partially or it doesn't flow at all. So the ones that don't flow at all, أجد قط بكت. Poor cat. ايه وجدتها والله. أجد قط بكت. The in-between ones is لين عمر. لام نون عين ميم راء. 5. The rest of the letters are رخو. Soft. Meaning the air flows at the articulation point. In the articulation point. Any questions? هل من السؤال؟ Fine. So here, there's a diagram to show the imprisonment of the flow of sound when pronouncing a strong letter due to closing off the articulation point, jim. So the tongue, the middle of the tongue closes. It touches the upper palate, the hard palate. Ajj, ajj, sajjaja, sajjaja. Yes, sajja, 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 sajja. It closes completely. Right? Nothing comes through. Right? And then the Sheikh categorizes the apparent, the strength letters into 2. Most are apparent and 2 are whispered. This is something that we mentioned earlier. So most apparent letters are also strength, most strength letters are apparent letters. Except for 2, kaf and ta. طيب. You gonna go? يلا السلام عليكم. So the pressure of the imprisoned sound behind the articulation point and its release defined the sound's features. So the pressure is blocked and then it's released. Ajj, ajj. So there's a sort of explosion that happens, right? Because the air is blocked and it wants to get through and it's pushing and it's pushing and it's pushing and then it finally gets through and then it explodes out. Ajj. Right? Strength and whisper in kaf and ta are characteristics in order. So for the 2 letters are strong at their beginnings and whispered at their ends. So, for example, ka, kataba. So it starts as strong, and it ends as a whisper. And this concept is clear when the letter is non-voweled, right? Book, bukratan, book, kitabak, kitabak, back, 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 كذبت, كذبت, كذبت ثمود, كذبت. So it's beginning, it's strength letter, and at the end, it's whisper. As for rakhawa, or softness, the complete flow of sound of the soft letter when it passes through the articulation point. And the example that is given is ash, 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 ash. In between is the partial flow of sound in the articulation point of the in-between letter due to its incomplete closure. The example that is given is with lam. So the lam, the edges of the tongue, or the tips of the edges, the ends of the edges of the tongue, or the closest part of the edges, right? They close off the articulation point, and the sound has to come out the sides of the tongue. So it's a partial closure. Allahu lillahi. The partial flow of the sound when pronouncing the ra due to the interception of most of the tip of the tongue to its release. So the tip of the tongue intercepts the ra, and the sound comes out the tip. Ar, 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 ar. So the tongue is trying, it's attempting to block, but the sound sneaks through. The meme and the noon, the sound is blocked with the noon at the tip of the tongue, and the sound comes out of the nose. With the meme, the sound is blocked at the lips, and then the sound comes out through the nose. So the sound initially goes through the mouth, and then it is bounced off, and then it goes up. Comes to the mouth, and then it goes up. It's blocked, it finds another way out. Amin, inna. As for the ayn, lisan or mizmar, or the epiglottis, it retracts, right? It retracts, and it partially blocks the flow of sound due to withdrawal of the epiglottis. أعناب نعبد عبد الله وعنب عي. So this is showing you each letter that is in between, what is blocking the flow. With the lam, the edges of the tongue block, and the sound comes out of the sides. With the noon, the tip of the tongue blocks, and the sound comes through the tip. With the noon and meme, the noon, the tip of the tongue blocks, and the sound comes to the nose. The meme, the lips block, and the sound comes to the nose. With the ayn, the epiglottis blocks or retracts, and the sound comes through a narrow passage. All right. You guys have any questions thus far? So I think it would be productive to stop here because there's a lot of information to process. So for the next class, before the next class, I'm expecting everyone to know the articulation points of the letters. Inshallah, next class is going to be on Thursday. Plus, the first two considerations for the opposites of characteristics. So the first consideration is flow of air or vibration of the vocal cords or not. The second consideration is flow of sound in the articulation point or not. So when it comes to flow of, when it comes to vibration of the vocal cords, it's either apparent letters or whisper letters. The whisper letters are sakata, fahathahu shakhsun. When the apparent letters are the rest of the letters. When it comes to flow of the letter or the sound in the articulation point, it either flows completely or partially flows or is totally blocked. If it is totally blocked, they are strength letters or shidda letters, which are ajidu qatin bakat. If there's partial blockage, then they are in between letters. The letters of in between are lin umar. If they flow with ease without any blockage, they are soft letters or rakhawa letters, and that is the rest of the letters. Any questions? تفضل.
تعالوا في درس السين الصاد وزي الفصل عن الثنايا السفلى التماس واقتراب.
اقتراب وليس التماس، لأنه إذا حصل التماس it would be they would become in between letters and not بين حروف بينية and not حروف رخاوة. بس لأنه يمنع من خروج الهواء من بين الأسنان. أيوه. طيب. Any questions online? طيب, we'll stop here إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.